Thank you very much for coming today. Welcome to our latest installment in our IFAJ webinar series. I'm Steve Werblow, president of IFAJ, and it's a real pleasure today to be here to help introduce the speakers for today's program. Before I do that, I want to thank Syngenta, which not only has been helping fund IFAJ and producing the webinar series or making it possible, but also lined up today's speakers. And you'll see how that ties very directly to really getting a look from the people at the cutting edge of what's going on in illicit trade and why that's so important. As far as housekeeping goes, we're going to talk about a couple of things. First of all, there is the chat where you can tell us where you're from. There's also a Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So the little question mark box is where we're going to look for questions at the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. So if you have a question, type it into the Q&A. If you see a question that you're especially interested in, you can upvote that and get it up to the top of the queue. So please take a look at what's being asked and upvote things that are of greatest interest, and we will try to get to all the questions, but certainly if it's higher in the list, we'll have a better shot at getting it. Also, as you know, this is being recorded. When we're done, we will post this on the ifaj.org website, so please do share it with your colleagues and make sure people are aware of not only this one, but the entire series of webinars that we've been putting on over the past several years. We've got a great set of resources. And so if you look at ifaj.org, look under our programs, you'll see webinars right there. So with that, I am going to introduce briefly our speakers. We're very fortunate today to have Laurent Giezendanner, sorry. He's head of Syngenta's group's corporate security, has over 25 years of security experience and manages a team of 20 security professionals based around the globe, focusing on criminal detection, deterrence, and response. We also have Jeff Hardy. He's the Director General of Transnational Alliance to Combat Illicit Trade. He has over 25 years of experience strengthening the voice of business in international policy. Jeff has pressed governments to set higher standards for global performance and pioneered mitigation tactics for securing supply chains and digital services. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Laurent and ask him to get us started.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks for organizing this webinar, and very happy to see so many people from around the world joining us today. I'm personally right now in China, in Shanghai, and focusing on the anti-illicit trade from that side of the world, and I'm very happy to be able to share a little bit about as we call this a bit of a deep dive on the world of anti-illicit trade for the ag industry. So just a few more words about me. I was, if I combine the experience of Jeff and mine, it's 50 years, just the two of us. I don't know how should I take this, but here it is. It's that's where we are. On my side, I would qualify me as a Swiss knife, if you don't mind, which is a little bit of my background and expertise is coming from multiple type of tools. I'm not like often some of my peers, head of security of big companies are former three letters agency, let's say. I'm not one of them. I'm coming from project management. I've always been into security for my entire career and for working for corporate organization. And before joining Syngenta, I was in the pharma world, doing the same for different type of industry. And of course, today we'll be talking about anti-illicit trade, but I just wanted to help you have a bit of view that security is covering different challenges. First and foremost, security of our people. Syngenta is 60,000 employees operating in more than 100 countries, including countries that are today in very difficult situation like Ukraine. And this is where we support our colleagues on the ground, colleagues going to meet farmers in places where they might be exposed while doing this, or places like in Mexico, where even if I absolutely love that country. Well, these are the sort of places where we need to train our colleagues or employees and make sure that we monitor the situation so that we can give them the right insight. I'll say more about illicit trade, of course, during that session. So with this, I'm very happy to have Jeff with us today. Early morning for him, and I will let Jeff tell you a little bit more about him and about his organization. Jeff, you just me a sign when you want me to show the next slide.
Yeah, well, thanks. You can put that slide up now if you like. Steve, thanks for hosting this event. Laurent, thanks for inviting me. My name is Jeff Hardy. I'm the Director General of the Transnational Alliance to Combat Illicit Trade. I thought that was a mouthful until I ran across the IFAJ and trying to spit that out too. So anyway, I guess we're part of that same family of difficult acronyms. Anyway, so my organization is a business-based trade association. So as most of you probably understand, a trade association serves at the guidance of its membership. And I thought I'd start off by showing you, the companies that are behind TRACIT. And you see down in the bottom right-hand corner, Syngenta's logo. And I think if you look at these corporations and think about the types of products they represent, you'll see that it's a very diverse collection of companies. And the one thing, though, that they have in common, what does Syngenta and Chanel have in common? Well, that's the fact that their products and their markets are at risk from illegal trade, from unfair competition, from counterfeiters, from smugglers, from companies that are selling falsified or substandard versions of their products. So we've organized TRACIT around the mission that we're going to look at the problem across sectors. And we are, from best I can understand, the only trade organization that does look at illicit trade in the agriculture sector, in the alcohol, in counterfeiting, illegal fishing, tobacco, pharmaceuticals. And, for example, today I'm here talking to you about the agriculture sector, food fraud, the relationship that pesticides and crop control has to play there. But, over the last couple of weeks, I've been spending a lot of time doing interviews with journalists on illicit alcohol and the toxic poisonings that happened in Laos. I don't know if any of you are tuning in from Southeast Asia, but there have been a lot of deaths in Turkey and Laos and Thailand recently, so we've been spending a lot of time on that problem. I'm going to Pakistan in a couple of weeks to look at the illicit trade in tobacco and tobacco smuggling in that country. New projects we have coming out on pharmaceutical diversion. I think there's some people from the UK. I was just in London a month or so ago talking about the demand that counterfeiting creates for forced labor in that country. So, it's a very complex and difficult issue. And today, I'm here to talk about the ag sector. So I think, I could leave it at that as terms of an introduction.
That's great. Thank you both. Can you give us an idea about what the illicit trade looks like, across the sectors that you serve?
Yeah, well, it's not a pretty picture, Steve. I mentioned a few of the sectors. I mean, we basically did a tally amongst the 12 sectors that we're looking at. I mentioned tobacco, counterfeits, wildlife, fish, forestry. I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, what's going on out there. I mean, I think the average person would not think that complex chemicals like crop protection and pesticides would be vulnerable to illicit trade. I think, let me just say something right now too. This is what I think this is why I chose to come to this meeting, because journalists have an extremely important role to play in educating people that this is happening. This situation used to be counterfeit handbags and street corner sales and music downloads. Probably all of us, are familiar with. That's really where that was the tip of the iceberg with the whole, illicit trade, counterfeiting, piracy dialogue 20 some odd years ago. But that whole thing has spread across all the different types of sectors I mentioned. Let's just take tobacco. 1 of every 10 cigarettes is an illicit smuggled product. 1 out of every 4 bottles of alcohol, believe it or not, is a substandard, falsified, unregulated, illegal type of a product. Wildlife trade, for example, could be up to $25 billion a year. And you've heard, I'm sure everyone's heard these horror stories of elephant tusks and rhino tusks, and it extends way, way beyond that into different types of plants, exotic animals that you wouldn't have any idea exist, let alone are being traded or being forced into extinction because some cultures and some countries have these exotic rituals that some of these plants or bones or skins, have medicinal or religious values, and it just drives an enormous global demand. Pharmaceuticals is a particularly, critical one. Any type of a falsified product or you're ingesting in any way, cosmetics putting on your face in any way, poses consumer health and safety risks. The U.S. Congress, for example, is starting to recognize this, and we're certainly trying to promote better legislation in the U.S. called the Shop Safe Act, which recognizes that consumers are at risk. So those numbers across those sectors add up to over $2 trillion and a year. And, it may sound like I'm exaggerating. It's only, it's 2 to 3% of global trade. But if you look at what governments like the World Trade Organization are trying to do with big, multilateral treaties, such as the Trade Facilitation Agreement, governments are trying to, grow GDP, grow prosperity. They're trying to grow economic development and encourage the development benefits of trade. And, with all of their efforts and negotiations, their ultimate objective is to put $2 trillion into the economy. And I've told the WTO many times over, well, one way to put $2 trillion back into the economy is to crack down on illicit trade, because those leakages in terms of economic development and prosperity are too big to ignore.
That's sobering. So it's one thing when we talk about the possibility of lost revenue, but you mentioned there are some real significant effects in terms of efficacy or in terms of health and safety. How does Syngenta look at illicit trade, and what's the scope and scale, and what's at risk?
Yeah, so this slide is I hope answering your question. So when you look at ag into the 2 main category of activities, one is the chemical, the crop protection products, and the other one is the seeds. And there are places, so there's more coordination in data gathering from the crop protection part, where you can see some more accurate data. Where for seeds, sometimes the information is not aggregated yet in a way that we can have a sort of a one number for the entire planet. So it's more market dependent. But this means at the end, when you look at our industry, the third bullet point here is talking about 6 billion. If this would be one company, it would be the 4th largest company in the ag business. This gives you an idea of the size. And why is it so big? Well, it's also because as I've always done in my career, we look at, we need to use criminal mind to understand if for criminals, this is an interesting business or not. And why would it be an interesting business? And a number of the elements mentioned by Jeff earlier, Steve, is that there's something about how much anti-illicit trade is on the top priority for law enforcement, customs, and regulators, and how much, what are the industry they try to protect first, or to try to focus on first, which I respect the limited resources, and therefore they need to make their choices, which I get. But criminals get that as well, and therefore they may see that there's a bigger chance to be challenged or to be stopped or put in jail if they mess up with pharmaceuticals compared to if they mess up with seeds. And so yes, fake tomato seeds are copied like Gucci bags, and you would not, and some of our complex chemicals, as Jeff mentioned, are as well. And there's something about the evolution, probably like the Rolex watches, where 20 years ago, a fake Rolex was probably source of a joke. The quality, the look and feel is, and these days, of course, there's an improvement. It doesn't mean that the fake Rolex is a Rolex, and it doesn't mean a fake illicit crop protection. Fake crop protection is always a pale sort of, it's a copy that is only trying to mimic what the product does, technically speaking, mimic a little bit of the outside of the package, and that's what they do. In the seizures that we have done in the last 2 years, you have an idea of a bit of the volume, but also the fact that post-COVID, like many other industries, we have seen and maybe Jeff will say a few words about this, because it's not specific to the ag world, but post-COVID, organized crime or cyber criminals saw the opportunity to get more clients by offering their products online. And we saw a monumental increase of online offers, illicit online offers. And that was for us the reason to really increase our ability to detect and then respond to those online, and use this as well for an additional source of intelligence to not only try to, let me say, whack them all online, because that's also the challenge. You have the feeling of taking down a website somewhere or an offer, but actually it pops up on another platform 5 seconds after, and you have not actually put your hands on the physical end product. And therefore, yes, we need to disturb the ability to promote their dirty business online by doing what you can see on this screen here, but we also need to always be systematic as much as we can to convert. I hope I'm not using too much jargon, but to convert the online detection to an underground, offline, as we call this work. So working then with local law enforcement, bringing our case to justice, and supporting law enforcement so that they can take case and move those cases forward. And just the map here on the right-hand side is a combination of external risk indicators, and Jeff will say probably a few words about the OECD illicit trade index, combined to where do we operate. The countries in gray, like Greenland, for example, which is in the media these days, as you can imagine, we don't do business in Greenland. So the countries that are in gray are countries where we don't do business. It doesn't mean we don't watch, well, except Greenland, because in Africa, for example, sometimes we are monitoring markets, which doesn't mean only a country where we do business, because we know that sometimes the country nearby will be affected by illicit trade. So yeah, that's my answer, Steve, sorry.
Jeff, did you want to elaborate on Laurent's comments about kind of the evolution of illicit trade sort of post-COVID?
You're on mute.
The irony is the question is post-COVID, and here 5 years later, I still can't remember to turn my microphone on. Well, I remember when we first started, that was so funny. Nobody could remember to turn their microphones on. Things have changed. I think I certainly spoke a lot around during COVID and immediately after COVID. And there's a lot of different things to talk about, but let me focus on an intersection between what I've seen and what Laurent just said about the pesticides industry. And if you just look at, if you can think back to, pre-2020, there were certain countries like the United States where e-commerce was really starting to grow. But then if you were really interested, and you might have read reports where some countries like South Korea, it was already e-commerce was already, significant parts of a significant portion of shopping, maybe 20 some odd percent or more. And a lot of analysts would point to, this is what the future looks like. These progressive countries are increasingly moving, commerce to an online platform. Then COVID hit. And then, people shopping from home grew exponentially. The stock prices of companies like Amazon and Target, and Walmart, those are American companies. Sorry for that reference only to US, but these companies, stocks went up because everyone could clearly see the future. And for me, that was the biggest takeaway, because we weren't just speculating about the future. We actually had a tangible insight into what the future would be. And my takeaway from illicits, because what we saw was there a flood of pharmaceuticals, starting with the personal protection products like face masks and gloves and sanitizer. And you hear these throwaway comments that, oh, criminals are one step ahead of, the legitimate industry. Well, there's an excellent example where, very entrepreneurial criminals were beginning to flood e-commerce with counterfeits. So what I saw, and this is hopefully the takeaway for today's presentation, is that the exponential real growth in online shopping, the exposure of consumers because of this new world, and the risk presented by the flood of counterfeiting across sectors, demonstrated that the world was woefully unprepared for a future to be dominated by online shopping, where there were no controls. There are very little control there, and any shopper is at great risk, especially to buying something, that is consumable and creates a health risk. Now, just my final comment in this space is on pesticides. No one would have ever thought. No one would have ever thought there'd be a global market for pesticides online. But not only are these products available on rogue websites established only for the sole purpose of selling fakes, but we have found in a report that I just put into the chat that major e-commerce platforms like eBay and Amazon and Mercado Libre and Alibaba, and the list goes on. I think we looked at least a dozen platforms are making these available online. And what is particularly, I think, scary, or that governments need to address right away, and I really hope that the journalists here pick this up. I've got a lot to say on this topic, but it's one thing to sell an IP infringement of a Gucci bag. That's a counterfeit. That's illegal. It's IP infringement. You take IP infringement of pesticides, and you multiply that by the illegal activity that you have to have a license to sell pesticides in virtually every country. And in many cases, you need to have a license or a permit to buy and use pesticides. So to what extent are these platforms ensuring that the sellers are licensed and that the products they're selling are going into a country where it's permitted? And that can be extended to other regulated sectors like alcohol and tobacco, which are, regulated by simple age gates. What are we doing? If a kid goes into a shop to buy a bottle of wine, they have to physically demonstrate that they're of age. In other words, that they meet the regulatory controls. What is done in pesticides? We have a report there. So those are my views post-COVID, a clear vision of what's happening. We're woefully unprepared. It's all over the place, and governments need to step up and stop, letting this happen, force liability on these platforms.
That's a great point. Now, in the spirit of disclosure, I'm going to let the audience know that I've seen these slides, so I'm going to ask leading questions, but I don't want anybody to think there's collusion here. This is all part of our webinar today. But if you could talk a little bit, you mentioned looking into the future. What does 2025 look like for trends and realities?
Is that to me?
Yeah, that would be great.
Well, I mean, I'd like to say that, we're stopping things. I hope that we're right now. I can only hope that we're stopping growth, because we're certainly not reversing any trends. I think if any message that anyone's picked up here from me today is that more and more sectors are vulnerable. starting with my story about, luxury goods, which now expands to, chemical sector and seeds, for goodness sake. So what's happening in terms of trends is you have a sort of a horizontal expansion to every product that conceivably you could think where you could make a criminal can make a buck. And so that's one trend, is it's everywhere. I was on a webinar looking at food fraud with the WTO, which has a close connection to pesticides, obviously, right? Because, if crop yields are at risk, that puts food security at risk. And so anyway, I think one of the biggest trends, future growth areas, is food and food fraud and agriculture, and then what that has to say about crop protection, because I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are all kinds of examples out there of adulteration, counterfeiting, and swapping, labeling issues, of in-use products like baby formula to commodities that are traded like coffee, for example. But I think for me, relevant to this webinar, that's a big trend out there is, there's every product under all the food products, I think, are extremely vulnerable to illicit trade. So there's more that I could say on the trends, but I think we need to TRACIT at least is very razor focused on e-commerce. I mean, that's the future, and that's also the future of growth. And I think we need to look at, non-traditional sectors such as chemicals and crop protection products. And I think we need to be very careful about our food supply.
It's really sobering. And when you think about off-label applications or unregistered products, or the impact that can have on trade for our audience's products is devastating, particularly if they're crossing borders. So with all of that, Laurent, what's the strategy? What is Syngenta's view of how to move forward with its products?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So maybe the high level is three movements. One is detection. The next one, in that logic order: detection, respond, and deterrence. So detection is obviously what was said just earlier, a significant increase of our detection capability online. We have designed and use our own AI-powered web monitoring, web scraping tool, which is today monitoring in 40 countries, more than 250 e-commerce platforms and websites. And the idea here is to be able to detect. So the AI solution that we use is looking at able to recognize objects, then is able to make sense out of text, make sense out of data, like, for example, the price, and being able to say that a very cheap price should trigger a specific action in Brazil and a different action in Poland, because the criminals are not using the same tactics, and they are also very aware of market dynamics. So when they see that the big players are promoting because it's just before the season, so they adapt to that, and we should never underestimate their ability to play smart and not only being like they used to be street criminals. So a lot is coming from this. Then we increase also the awareness of our own employees, but also awareness of law enforcement of different type of groups. It can be police, it can be custom. We also collaborate a lot with Europol, Interpol, and other groups, so that we can have the best possible early signs that something wrong is happening. And then, of course, there is the response. And the response can be, as I said a little bit earlier, the detection and actions online. But very often, we then go into try to identify those what we called big fish. So those organized crime that are offering large quantities of products. And And of course, those people, they would know, like if I say, hey, it's Laurent, and I'd like to buy some of your product to test it in our labs, of course, they're never going to sell their fake. They may sell genuine or they don't sell. So there's a need to find a way to approach them, to play their game, if you like, and approach them, of course, at the end of the day, which is the last part, we want to go with a legal action, which means that legal action is front or top of mind from day one to the last day. So from the first point of, let's say, question we have on a case, we need to be very solid legally because we bring this to a judge somewhere, and the judge needs to be able to say, so where did you get this information? How did you collect it? How did you preserve it? And we need to be rock solid so that the judge cannot say, oh, no, you're not good enough, I let that go, because I respect their prioritization, but also their level of requirement. So there's really the need to be solid in the detection, both from AI, but also from human intelligence. Then we need to be consistent on the ground to have the right mechanism to be able to identify the targets, preferably not the resellers, not the basic distributors, but the source. And then from there, work in close collaboration with law enforcement, or I would say support law enforcement so that they can then make the right moves and do the right actions. That is, in short, what we do.
That is absolutely fascinating. Jeff, did you have something you wanted to add to that? You had that lean in mode.
Huh? No, no, I think, you know, companies like Syngenta are doing the best that they possibly can. I think what's important to remember is that, Laurent showed a slide earlier and he said, if you took the collective sale of fake pesticides, that would be the fourth biggest competitor in the marketplace, so what they're doing, they're competing against an illegal product, but that's using their brand, their logo, their packaging, and it's not their problem. I mean, it's not their product. So you're out there doing business, trying to grow your market, and you have this unfair, illegal competition. So they're doing everything they can do to stop it. This slide shows what they're doing. They're investing in protecting their supply chain, right? They're hiring investigators to find factories that are making this. They're contacting law enforcement to try to get these factories shut down. They're working with customs to strengthen the border. They're this tool that Laurent was talking about. They're crawling all over the internet, trying to find this stuff and taking it down. That is aside from the business that they're trying to do, which is the research and development that's required to make crop protection chemicals effective, the breeding of seeds and plants to make them resistant to bugs. Sorry for the pests. Um, and that's their core business. So they're spending, I don't know, I mean, it's up to Laurent to put a price tag on. They're spending this enormous amount of money that could be channeled into better seeds, better crops, better distribution of their products, putting it in hands of farmers at lower prices. And so you might say, well, where do I come in there? Because the companies are doing what the best that they can do. But if they do all of those things in a China, in a Turkey, in a Romania, in a Costa Rica, in a Brazil, spend all of that money and they, sort of bring the case to the judge, so to speak, if they can't get the attention of law enforcement, if law enforcement isn't effectively cracking down and shutting down these factories or letting them reopen, if they're not penalizing the criminals that are illegally selling the products, right? If the judges aren't responding to the lawsuits where these companies are coming to them and saying, here's what we've identified, we're suing this platform. If the judge looks the other way or a criminal system doesn't have time to process something, then we're not going to make any progress. And that's what TRACIT tries to do, is that we're trying to explain and educate governments how deep this problem is, how wide it's spread, and how we're not just pointing fingers and asking government to solve the problem, even though they should anyway, because it's illegal activity. But we're showing what business is doing, and we're asking governments to step up and support this, try to rid the, economy of illegal and unfair competition.
That's great. I'm going to ask, I know you've got a case study that we could discuss, and I think that'll start to touch some of the questions that we're going to hear in the Q&A from Rachel and
Yeah.
Gary. So if you could tell us a little bit about what you brought as a case study, I think that'll be fascinating.
Sure. So we are in Indonesia, and what you see here on the top right is an offer that has been detected by our AI robot. And what the AI does is it looks at objects, and he would know that when we talk about, and he looks at words and price, and so, and as well location. So it's going to make sense of this is that offer in that country for that market. So he would recognize that this is the right bag. And I should say why we do object recognition, because it's not like it would be very complex. But when we are very active in all of those markets, what we start to see is that don't underestimate how smart and powerful are those criminals. They are pushing a lot of offers of pens. Pens with that NK610 on the pen, and with the Syngenta logo on that pen. We don't sell pen, but they know that they want to confuse the tool, because they know that we use AI tool to identify the object. So they would have baseball cap, they would sell Syngenta t-shirts. We're not zero t-shirts. So it gives you an idea of, how's the competition between, mouse and cat, if I can say. So we identify the case. Then we start to engage on the ground and say, okay, so can we find a way to buy one of those bags? And can we confirm what is in that bag? And usually what we have is a relatively good bag. It's not the same, but the farmers, for them, it's not like if they would buy a very expensive pharmaceutical injectable product. Okay, so they buy those bags. They wouldn't know that. They can be duped by the quality of, or by the look and feel of the bag. And then the seeds inside are usually very bad quality. To give you an idea, what we do very often is that we have so-called the seeds have what we call coating, which is there is a little bit of a product that is put on the seed so that the seed is protected when we plant, and it includes some of the products that the seeds need to grow. Often the criminals, they will copy that coating with car paint. So they would take a ton of seeds, and they would wash them with blue paint, and then the seeds are that light blue or light pink, that the one we have, and that's one of that's the challenge. And then, as we have great collaboration with the Indonesian police and Indonesian General Directorate for Intellectual Property Office, the IGPD something, then when we have all the facts and we have been able to identify the production facility, we are doing on the ground monitoring, which means we follow those. Imagine in a big city, you follow the one that is selling a small quantity from one farmer to the other, and we are not arresting that guy. We are usually following this vendor, this distributor, or this courier, until we get to the point where we have the location that we want police, or we suggest police to act on, and then we provide them with all the facts, all the evidence, and with this they decide they take the case or not. And in this case, for example, here they take the case, and then of course we're very happy for them, not for us, but for them to promote as a deterrence. Remember the detection, response, deterrence. The deterrence is here for police to make this public and show that there is that you have penalties, and that you take the risk if you don't follow the law.
That is tremendous. This actually relates to a couple of questions Rachel Martin from Ireland has, and I'm going to kind of lump a couple together. She's asking, how do these counterfeit, when we've talked about the idea of, say, online sales, and there you've got a kind of a direct shipment. But are there other ways that products are getting into the marketplace, counterfeit products? And how do farmers determine what's legitimate and what is illicit?
Yeah, so they would rely on their usual supply, right? So the farmer would trust, if you like, his local distributor. Now, is the local distributor reliable is another question. So it could be that the local distributor is sure to be delivered by the same large distribution center, and may not be very accurate about know your customer or know your partner, and that is one source. Of course, particularly in developing countries, the young farmer community is more and more using online as they are, I don't know, you take Thailand, and in Thailand, for example, there is one Facebook group that is organized by an association of farmers, and they have 60,000 farmers. And those 60,000 farmers exchange information about weather, about how is the season progressing, and if they have, and then sometimes some people may inject into that Facebook group news about a new product that can help to deal with a weather pressure that we have. And that could lead to farmers being, they find that ad relevant at the right time on the right moment. And so they say that it must be genuine. And they may then click and go into the wrong side and being sure they are buying the right product. And unfortunately, they may then destroy their whole season because they then apply the wrong product, and that is really dramatic. So that's an example. So you have, if I can say, Steve, you say very often we see farmers that are they are duped, so they are sure to buy genuine. Okay, in some cases you have farmers that are maybe playing with the fact that the product they want is not available in their country. And now online, so those that are members of larger farmer groups, they would say to kill that bug, this is the best product, but it's not registered in your country. And then the criminals will know that. And then they would say, hey, if you need, okay, it's not, and then this is when the farmer may do a trade-off of say, I really need that product, and okay, it's not really, and that is where they go from one problem to a bigger problem, let's say.
Now to carry on with Rachel's question, she points out that if you buy a designer handbag and you know what you're looking for, you may be able to find a special code, or we've seen football jerseys with holograms on them to try to show you this is real, FIFA gear or whatever. Are there authentication cues on crop protection products, on seeds, that farmers should be looking for? Is there a way to check and authenticate their purchase?
Good point. The name of this program for us is called Global Product Digitalization, rolled out now in 50 countries worldwide for Syngenta, and progressing. And yes, the idea is to say that what you want is to have on all our products, or at least on the most exposed one. But I think the wish is to implement at large scale, so that with as a farmer yourself, Sendphone, you can scan, and then that's going to tell you if it's a genuine product or not. It's already implemented, as I said. It started in many countries in Asia, now Latin America, and as I said earlier, we operate in 100 countries, so we need a little bit more time to deploy. But yes, that's a way for us to give an indication to farmers. Now, again, not underestimating criminals. And you have that for all, and maybe Jeff can say, you have that for all industries, right? So you are a consumer, you're going to scan, and your phone is going to tell you it's right. But if the whole chain behind is fake, including you scan and it pings into a website that is going to send you a message saying it's fine, then it's fine. And there is a little bit of, I'm not saying that, I think it's very good to do, and we are implementing this at full speed and with the whole energy and determination. But the criminals are less and less. I mean, they are. Unfortunately, the human nature is making criminals. There's a sort of we raise the bar like a weapon, like a bad weapon race, if you like.
Yeah.
On that and building on that, Gary Hartley has asked if you've got specific examples you can share of the kinds of agricultural products that are out there, some specifics our
Yeah.
journalists can bring to their audiences.
That would be, let's say, I would love to be able to answer to that question, because that would mean we have only a limited problem on few products. Now, the challenge we have is that the criminals are driven by market dynamics. So in country A, the products that people are talking about online, or people are in need, or because there is a shortage, are this and this product, and then they would make those products available. So I think what we need to answer this question, we need to say, what are the products that criminals can sell easily? And because there is a shortage, because there is a high demand, and this is usually the product that because they are not looking specifically at insecticide, fungicide, or corn seeds or tomato seeds. They adapt, offer demand, and that's how bad, if you like, if I can say, is the challenge or the problem.
Now, another question from Gary ties right into that then, and it kind of relates to the authentication that Rachel was talking about. Is there a test that a distributor or a farmer group can conduct on products to check authenticity? Is there, quick checks or anything along those lines for illicit products?
You mean with a device, or no? That is not available yet. As I said, in many countries, what we have is GPD. So this means we would promote in those countries when it's available, when authentication feature is implemented, we will then, of course, promote it a lot. What we do through our stewardship program, so when we train farmers for product safety, we would inform them about what are the usual in-country legitimate source, and also remind them to be careful about if they have been getting their supply from the same source for years, and then suddenly change because there's such an attractive offer. Sometimes it doesn't mean it's a good offer. So
if it's too good to be true, that's a signal. All right.
Yeah.
Well, and there was a question too about what the implications are in big picture ways. So we've talked about money, we've talked about brand, we've talked about the integrity and value, but are there other issues? And for instance, Rachel's asking risk to safety, risk to food safety, risk to the health of workers. I keep thinking about, ships docked and that can't unload because, we've seen situations where an unlabeled seed product has been found in a load of grain, and that has forced the entire ship to turn around. What do you see when you look at illicit trade in agriculture as some of the big implications?
Do you want to give it a go, Jeff?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just a couple of points on the questions that were asked. I mean, digitalization and track and trace technologies are being, applied and developed across all the sectors. And I think what's interesting, and Laurent, alluded to this, is that then the seals, the tracking devices, the verification codes are becoming a market of counterfeiting and falsification in and of themselves. So, companies that try to, create holograms in their labels, well, that's a great idea for a while until it gives birth to a whole new marketplace of counterfeiting. Like I was saying before, one sector leads to another. Part of the growth in counterfeiting is the horizontal expansion of it. Now you're talking about I was talking about, the food is increasingly at risk. Well, now, authentication technologies is an industry in and of itself. It's a legitimate business that has R&D and investments and stakeholders and shareholders and all the rest. Now their business is at risk. So I just wanted to add that to the question that was out there. But when you talk about the risks, you were talking about, ports being held up, you know, in other words, the safe passage of, product through the global supply chain. We sort of drop that into economic growth and GDP because, if you look at that, companies are trying to move product from production to consumption as fast as they can. The longer it's in the supply chain, the more it costs, the lower the profitability and all the rest. And there's a great set of standards that we've been using to convey where those harms are to economy and society. And I just, lopped a bunch of them together under decent economic growth. But I put a link in the chat to a report that we presented to the UN Trade and Development Committee in Geneva. In fact, Laurent was there and made a presentation. So what we did is the UN has established 17 sustainable development goals that run anywhere from no poverty to, climate change. And so those are, the world's governments have decided, these are really the 17 standards that we need as an international community, to make sure that everyone's happy and healthy and there's prosperity and security and the rest. So we thought that it would make a lot of sense to compare those standards to illicit trade and demonstrate how illicit trade was undermining, a country and or the world's ability to achieve these goals. So I put a link in the chat that would take you directly to that report. And I'll just summarize some of them real quickly, but some of those goals are like no poverty. So if you have, if illegal pesticides are undermining crop yields, then, the agriculture sector itself has a limited ability to contribute to global growth and no poverty. Same thing with zero hunger. If the food security is destabilized and, that less access to food. Same thing with good health. If consumers are exposed to harmful ingredients or inactive, well, let's just leave it at harmful ingredients. It puts consumer health at risk. Same thing with GDP. There's standards in there for criminality, the use of land, the use of water, all of which can be impacted by chemicals that aren't regulated to ensure that they have limited mitigated harm on land and water. So it's a big discussion. I think it's quite revealing as to how far those negative externalities spread across society and the economy. And if you're interested, if any of the reporters are interested, take a look. That report, it's fascinating.
It sounds fascinating. And Caroline from the UK just asked a question will probably be great to end on, and it's nice and specific, which we as journalists really like. She's saying, can you clarify a little more on exactly how the products are tested? So this, I think, goes to that idea, Laurent, of procedure that you were talking about, both understanding the procedure and then making it legally tight. So how are they treated to be, or proven to be ineffective and tested? And then that may help us too with the impacts, because it's an illustration.
So it's all connected to the receivability of the evidence. So this means, in general terms, I would say we do a fingerprinting. So we compare the fingerprint of the product to of the product that we have purchased to the genuine product, and like that we can compare fingerprint. And a little bit like in a police investigation, if the fingerprint is not enough or the fingerprint doesn't give us enough, so is not received by the judge, then we go for DNA, and then we may have to then do a deeper, if you like, level of assessment. And I'm not gonna get into the detail of how we do that for chemicals, but obviously we then need to have, and we have a procedure implemented so that we preserve evidence, we demonstrate how we have done the test, we demonstrate the comparison, and if the case is very obvious because the product is of a very poor nature, then usually the judge is not asking for the full end-to-end DNA analysis if he's okay to receive the evidence based on a first assessment. And so, yeah, I would say this is how we practice, but obviously this needs to be very rigorous. This needs to be obviously legal because we want justice to be implemented, and that's why we then follow the procedure that is aligned with the judicial framework in which we operate for that case.
Great. And then just to make sure I'm understanding, so fingerprint could be DNA fingerprinting or the genes in a particular seed, or it could be a chemical, analysis
Yeah.
that gives you the patterns that you need.
Exactly, and that can be
Okay.
from with different labs. You go to a different level of depth, if you like, and often there's no need. There's few jurisdictions where, let's say, law enforcement are pushing back more than, but yeah, that's the nature of the work. So when there is a very strong pushback, then you need to put more argument on the table, and sometimes when there is a better or a different awareness, let me say, on anti-illicit trade, then usually of course, we need to be rock solid, but they don't ask for the entire, encyclopedia of what can be produced for that case.
Well, it certainly seems you will be busy for at least the next couple of years. Sounds like you've got job security, both of you.
Unfortunately, one could say.
Exactly. I'm going to hold to our hour. We promised our speakers we'd get this in an hour, and so I really appreciate both of you being here, Laurent, Jeff. It's been fascinating, and we appreciate the statistics you've shared and the insights. Laurent had offered to share slides, so if you want a set of slides, please let Martina know, and we'll get that to you. We're also going to, speaking of sharing, we're going to post this again on the ifaj.org website under webinars, and it'll be on our YouTube page. And then where you see that, you'll also see the whole series of webinars that we put together. We encourage everybody to share these with colleagues in their guilds, and to join us again when we come back with our next webinar. In the meantime, thank you very, very much, and I wish you a great day in Shanghai, Laurent, and a great morning in Florida. And everybody, thank you very much for attending.